shown up yet for the chat, we'd really appreciate that because we want to have a big, robust conversation. I'm really excited that I'm joined by Smita Saw, and then I'm joined by Elena Kalova today, that we're going to have a really impactful conversation about the future of ranking and scheduling and making sure that we deliver an awesome candidate experience. As we're getting started with as we're waiting for a few more people to show up, I will let everybody know that today's webinar is being recorded by the team at BlueGen that is presenting this presentation to you. I'm joined by Jeff, who is the founder of the organization. I'm really excited about the fact that he's been able to bring together a wide cross-section of opinions and objective knowledge about what we're building, or I should say, what is being built in the entire TA ecosystem when it comes to the benefits of AI recruiting. For those of you who are joining, I'm Brian Fink. I'm a talent acquisition partner at McAfee Security. We help keep you safe across the web. And I'm excited to be here today. And thank you for letting me have this privilege, Jeff. I'm going to pass the mic real quick to Elena and ask her to give a brief introduction. Oh no, you're on mute. You knew it was going to happen, right? It happens at least once on one of these things, right? So we got over that easily.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Brian. Super excited to be here alongside with all of you. My name is Elena. I've spent over 18 years in talent acquisition and HR, various different spaces, tech, SaaS, social, gaming, anything you could really imagine, and really excited to be here and give some background on my expertise in the area, and super excited for what's to come in AI. So thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Smita, over to you.
All right. Hey, everyone. Good morning. I am based here in San Jose, California. And I, just like Elena, I have more than 20 years experience encompassing talent acquisition to HR. I have seen it all. You know, I started recruiting when we were cold calling candidates or meeting candidates in person, to now using, Gen AI and everything in between. So I'm very excited to be on today, this panel, and see, what kind of questions out there, learn from, each other, and also, educate each other. This is an evolving field for all of us. And we all are getting to, dip our toes and see what's working, what's not working. And I'm excited about where Gen AI takes us on this journey for talent acquisition.
Well, Smita, maybe that's the best place for us to get started, is about the contributions that HR professionals can make to enhancing the effectiveness of generative AI. Before I go there, I just want to let everybody know we have some questions that we're going to go through as a panel, kind of talk about in a round robin. We'll do that for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we're going to turn the mic over to you and answer your questions. If you want to think about it as Stump the Chump, maybe that's what this will evolve into, and then we'll wrap things up with a concise kind of recap. To that, I want to go back to the question that I was starting to ask Smita, is that HR professionals, we're responsible for so much of the adoption or effectiveness of Gen AI within companies. Specifically, how should we ensure respect and fairness to each candidate when matching them to the right job using matching technology?
All right. And I think, Brian, that's a very, important question for all of us. The fact is, you may have heard stories about, how people send their resumes to different ATS, different companies, and then they are lost. They never hear about it, right? LinkedIn is full of those stories. Anybody, you talk to who has been looking for a job, they'll have a similar story. In fact, I read a Wall Street Journal article that Greenhouse, a very popular ATS company, they reported that as opposed to last year, this year, each recruiter is getting on an average of 400 resumes per job, right?
I would agree with that.
So the important thing is, like anything else, whenever something is new, people have doubts about it, right? They're not sure. They're excited, but they're not sure, right? And I would say educating everybody involved in the process as to what Gen AI is going to be doing and not doing. See, we all forget one very important thing in any technology, right? There is always a customer. Of course, there are TA people at the other end, but there are candidates who are talking about your company, who are talking about the experience, right? So as HR person, I would educate candidates out there, that, hey, this is what we are using and this is the use of it, right? So transparency is very important, right? Setting guardrails around, what Gen AI will do or not do, right? Where will be the checkpoints? You just cannot, accept, at least at this point in time, the output. You have to have, certain points where you will do audits, right? I've seen companies also, I've heard of companies, also bring in some external auditors to see for bias detection, right? So as human beings, we are also prone to bias. We may not know it, right? Because it's a normal.
So it makes me go back to the question, right? Like, who's programming these algorithms, right? Are they imbuing them with their bias? Not to go on a slippery slope, but how are recruiters supposed to act free of bias if there's a bias in the machine? I'm just curious about that.
Yes. So, if the company, if I were to buy as a head of HR, sign off on a Gen AI tool to, help us with TA, I would ask the questions, show me, do some tests, right? Put some test data there and see whether the output is fair, transparent, ethical or not. Like, if I am putting a particular qualification or a particular area code or a particular skill, is it only matching a certain type of people, right? So I would do a pilot. Like if I were to introduce a tool, I would definitely do a pilot and, reach out to certain candidates and say, hey, this is a pilot we are doing, please help us, right?
I love that idea. I love that idea. Elena, I want to turn it over to you. What are your thoughts about this idea of doing a pilot or running something that's smaller in scope before the rollout to a broader organization?
Yeah, Brian, I think it's a great idea. And to Smita's point, checks and balances are very important, right? I mean, it's still Gen AI is still very new. So I think not just even a pilot, but perhaps checking in quarterly and maybe even going back as it's all coming in, going back and seeing what are some of the resumes we might have rejected, what are some of the resumes we didn't look at, perhaps, and make sure that there isn't bias there, right? And I think continuous feedback is huge. So no matter what tool you deploy, really, I think it's staying close to the tool that you choose and your CSM and constantly giving feedback on if there are any places where you could avoid bias or there were resumes that you thought were missed later on. I think it's crucial to give that feedback to the company as well. So it's an ongoing learning for us and for AI. So I think that's the best part of it is we get to do it together.
About the best part of it, what do you showed some highlights there. What do you think the benefits are of using AI in recruiting?
Yeah, I think we're already seeing it because it's not new, not completely new, right? So we're already seeing kind of how it helps with productivity, how, we get, Smita mentioned, we get more resumes than we did last year just because of the macroeconomics of where we are. And now, the recruiters can be inundated, especially in some GNA roles where there's thousands of resumes in one day, right? And so as a sourcer, or maybe even as a recruiter who doesn't do sourcing, but now has all these resumes that the source can go through. It's a lot. You can get inundated, and I just think it's the ROI is saving time, and then obviously saving money, right? And I think that's been huge already. And even when you think about writing job descriptions and things that we used to do manually, we have the power now of AI, and it's super exciting for me. I also work on the HR side, so the power of AI when I have something simple and compliance can't keep up with all the laws, right? So there's just so many different aspects of how it's helped in talent and HR. So I'm super excited for it.
So about that excitement, and whoever wants to go next can, is that I'm wondering, Elena, you brought up the historical perspective that AI has always kind of had a role, or machine learning and various tools have kind of had a play in this for the past umpteen years. Do you remember a time, when something else came along that was this revolutionary to recruiting? I'm just thinking about it in terms of historical context.
I'll do a quick one. And I don't want to date myself here. I'm sure Smita feels the same, being in the industry for some time. But when we had to do career fairs, we had to fax resumes. I mean, a lot of people might not even remember this, but this was a thing. Really, just even scraping the internet wasn't a thing for people's emails, and trying to figure out where these candidates actually are. And you would do billboards for career fairs, right?
Yes, yes.
The .com came, it boom. It's all cyclical, and I'm just super excited for it because I don't want to be faxing resumes ever again. So
well, if I can interrupt here for a quick second, that's how I got started in recruiting, not by faxing resumes, but by putting together the career fairs where people had to fax their resume to be invited to the career fair. So I totally get that, right? Like I just had a flashback. I'm not sure if it was a positive thing or a negative thing, but I just had that flashback. About the flashback, Smita, how do you think AI is really going to change everything from like everything that comes next? What do you think is the trajectory?
All right. So I would like to go back to your earlier question, what was the other event to the magnitude of AI? Just being able to post your jobs online, wherever it happened, in the late 90s, it sort of changed it democratized the whole talent acquisition process. Employers could, cast a wide net, right? And candidates got an opportunity to explore what their options. And of course, with that came the issue of getting too many resumes, and sometimes, as recruiters call them, irrelevant resumes, right? So, Elena mentioned to this, the macroeconomic situation that is happening right now, right? So I think people are just sending their resume. They are desperate. They want to be employed, right? And on the other hand, companies need to fill these positions fast. They want to get the best quality hire into those roles, right? So that's where AI, I think, has the ability or the potential to kind of bring more, reduce the time to hire, right? You don't have time to go through 400 resumes and talk to, like there used to be statistics, I forgot now, but for every
6 to 8 seconds per resume, was that the stat that you were looking for?
No, like for every position, if you have 100 resumes, then you will filter them to this, you will do this much phone screening, you'll have so many on-site interviews, 3 offer, then 1 will accept, right? And it took 90 days. I remember, even in 2012, I was telling my hiring managers, this position is going to take 90 to 120 days. And they would look at me like, I was saying something very crazy, right? And so the time to hire is very important to shorten that. And candidate experience, as I'm very, very aware, you don't want people to write about the negative experience that they have with you, because you've heard that there were 20 interviews and then there was no feedback, or nobody got back to them, and all of those things, right? So the AI, I'm excited about the fact that it can sort of automate or can bring more decision making to the whole process. And again, to my earlier point, it doesn't mean that you've completely relegated or delegated the TA process to Gen AI or AI tools. You're also involved in making sure that the output that is coming at the end of the process is fair, transparent, and meets your ethical standards.
Well, let's talk about those ethical standards, because there are very few matching and ranking tools that are utilizing real generative AI. that they're just using machine learning features often as a peripheral feature. You know, they're doing this matching, but they're not doing this ranking, and they're being trained on historical data, which perpetuates the biases that were exhibited in those earlier hires. How do we make sure that this is fair and just? And yeah, I'm trying to wrap my head around that.
Uh, you know, again, most of the ATS tools out there that are using machine learning algorithms were designed 10 years ago, right? The technology changes very fast. They're legacy now, right? And as you know, changing, software is very tough, enterprise level. You just can't go in and, embed 3 codes and, hope that it will suddenly become bias free. So to your point, all those ATSs that were trained on historical data, of course, they will have a tendency to perpetuate, the bias that was already there. And hence, Gen AI is so interesting because it will, work on making sure that it's learning itself, right? It's not just trained on some historical data, right? It has human-like capability to kind of make decisions and judgments based on similar data. So the hope is, right? Again, Gen AI algorithms are also trained on data. So the important thing is, if you're selecting, a Gen AI tool, you ask, what was it trained on, right? And do audits there, right? And make sure that, some ethical, like whatever, every company, every organization has its own set of values, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. But those values, they don't, values may vary from company to company, but I think what's important to mention here is that some states have implemented laws that require companies to respond to those audits when using any type of AI in recruiting. Now, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a law school dropout, full true story, full stop. What I do know is that companies are adopting AI so that they can reduce time to hire. I'm just wondering, is that the right metric that we should be following, Elena, that we should adopt these tools so we can reduce time to hire, or should we be looking for other features?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brian. I think there's a lot of different ways that we could utilize AI, not just reducing time to hire. To Smita's point, to your point, AI is always learning, right? And I think the thing that we're not talking about here, but we should be, is staying close to the partners that whatever tool you decide to use, you typically have someone on the other end. So really continuously giving them feedback so they can give their product team feedback, so they can make sure that, everything is fair and just in terms of how you move forward with the candidates. But I think not just time to hire, it's also, has it reduced the time for a hiring manager to pump out a job description? Has it helped the hiring manager to even look for a category that they might have not thought of to begin with? There's various different ways, and I think I hit a little bit on this too, even compliance. And you talked about California compliance, right? What kind of description are you putting together? Are we making sure it's diversity and inclusion oriented? Like what you mentioned, companies having different values, like are those values highlighted? Do they jive with the audience, so to speak, that you're trying to hire? So I think it's many different things. I mean, a lot of companies will send candidate surveys, right? To see how was the process? What did you think? And I think that's super important. As talent leaders, we should be looking very carefully at those surveys after the fact, especially when we're deploying a new tool and saying, hey, like, was this effective? Do the candidates feel like there's trust there? Do they feel like, oh, it's probably an AI tool and nobody's really looking at my resume? I've seen companies now put on their website, are you interested in AI looking at your resume? Literally, you can opt out of that being an option.
Wow, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, or they'll disclose that, hey, by the way, this is what we're doing. And I don't think, and again, I'm not a lawyer either, just like you, but I've seen that be a piece of it, and it's just an interesting way to go about it. But I think there's a lot of different factors. I think candidate experience is also a piece of it, not just, how fast are we looking at the resumes, but how trusted. I think Smita mentioned it, like, how does it make the candidate feel about the process, right? So that's just as important. Your company reputation is incredibly important.
You know, you touched on something there about using Gen AI to write job descriptions and to make sure they're free of bias and to make sure that they're more inclusive and that they gravitate towards company values. That's a really good call out. Like I had not, like, honestly, I had not thought about using Gen AI as a means to write the job description. I've thought of some other tools that are available to eliminate the bias from a job description. I'm wondering though, and Smita, Elena, even Jeff, weigh in on this. Is anybody using Gen AI to make better Boolean strings for active sourcing?
I mean, I think Jeff can maybe speak to. We haven't heard from Jeff yet, so maybe we
Yeah.
can toss it to him.
Well, I'm trying to let the panel talk amongst themselves. You know, we've sponsored the event, but we didn't necessarily want to guide it. My answer to the question that you have posed is that there are a number of technologies that use automation, menu-driven capabilities to construct Booleans to do active searching. So what that means is that they have some mechanism for you to assemble, you know, we want candidates with this characteristic and or that characteristic, assemble that string, and then launch it into various environments to produce a list of candidates, potential candidates, right? There are a couple of products that are just now using Gen AI to help populate the, you know, ands and ors inside of those Booleans. Not necessarily construct it without the guidance of the human, but there is some technology. And that is, to my mind, on the periphery of use. In other words, it's using Gen AI within the talent acquisition technologies, but on the periphery, as opposed to being in the core where it's, you know, reading the resumes. That's a little less common.
You used a really powerful word there, Jeff. You talked about guidance, and I think it goes back to the comment that Smita made in the beginning, where we're not letting the machines run the entire process. We're there with a steady hand on the wheel to make sure that it's free of bias, to make sure that there is that if there is a bias, that we can remove that, or that error, or that overgeneralization. Smita, I want to come back to you and ask, what other guidance would you give about guidance when it comes to managing an AI?
So, you know, one thing I would also, you know, again, you know, the world out there is sort of scared about how, you know, AI is going to impact their jobs, right?
Sure.
So I would start by, you know, every organization, you know, needs to put together a sort of strategy as to where AI is going to be helping. You cannot just, you know, say, oh, we are going to adopt AI, but where, right?
What does it mean? Yeah.
What does it mean? You know, what areas of, you know, your workflow are going to be, you know, given to AI, where you, and then the other part of that is upskilling your workforce, right? How to use it, right? Trust it, right? As TA, and coming back to what the topic here is, TA professionals, they themselves have to be able to use and leverage and trust the system, right? I would also champion, you know, governance, that, you know, what are the guardrails we are putting here, right? And for that, you have to make sure that, you know, you're vetting the vendors that are supplying you these tools, right? You're scrutinizing their algorithms for potential issues. Again, I want to give you an example, and this happened to me a few years ago. Somebody gave me a job description and I posted it. And then I realized that it had a term called digital natives. You know, to me, it seemed very, you know, it was I'm like, okay, digital natives mean, you know, people who are proficient. And then I realized, no, it means that people, you know, it is eliminating all the people like me. We were not digital natives, like, you know, again, dating myself. We grew up in the 80s and the 90s, right? We were not born with laptops, you know, as like 1-year-olds. So stuff like that, right? It's a very small example. But if AI can help at least highlight those things. Like I said, each one of us brings his own bias, and these are unconscious bias. For most of us, our biases are unconscious. We don't realize, right? And I think that's where Gen AI can help us at least flag this, that this seems a problematic statement or a problematic term. Relook at it.
Sure,
Right.
sure.
And that's where.
Elena, I would be remiss if I didn't give you the opportunity to weigh in on that, about the utilization and the guidance given to generative AI.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned this before, and I've heard it before. I don't know who coined this term, but it's like the tractor and the farmer, right? You have a tractor to get, your crops going and make it done faster, right? But you can't do it without someone actually controlling the tractor and figuring out where the tractor is going, how many crops is it actually harvesting a day or an hour. So this is a tool, right? It's a tool to help us get to the next place. It's not going to replace us. It's just going to hopefully, be the next vehicle, I should say, to get us to a better place in TA. And I hope actually that it will eliminate bias. I've heard the opposite opinion as well when, there's now chatbots as well coming out for recruiting, and they don't hear accents, they don't see your name, they just hear what your skills are. So there's another version of this where you can say it actually eliminates bias, right? So devil's advocate, but it could be good.
All right, so just to recap, before we kind of move on to the next big agenda item, we've talked about using Gen AI to write job descriptions, to construct search, to quickly subset a candidate pool without weighing or scoring the aspects of a candidate and removing bias from that process. This has been a great conversation thus far. I want to shift it, though, to matching and ranking of active candidates. How would, and I open up the floor to this, is that how would you differentiate what matching and ranking is compared to active sourcing in the recruiting ecosystem?
So, Brian, matching and ranking is mostly on, inbound candidates, the resumes that have already been come in, or you want to source candidates and, you want to put criteria there as to. So matching and ranking, and we're talking about a world where skill-based hiring is becoming very, very important, right?
Sure.
And you want to make sure that when you have all these 400 resumes coming in, that you match and rank them based on the skills that were highlighted for the job, right? And sort of match and rank them so that you can then focus your attention on those, your top, whatever your criteria was for those candidates, right? And I think it is, again, coming back to candidate experience, it's important to also get back to, the other candidates and say, like you can see with 400 resumes as a human being, it would take me forever to get back to them. But if I'm using an AI tool and it tells me this is how your matching and ranking is, it could be a company, process that, okay, the people who are in the bottom, 20%, 30%, that we would say, hey, right now, not a match. However, in future or whatever, we'll come back to you, sort of thing, right?
I like that.
And then, then you focus on giving a good experience to the candidates that matched your, that were high up on your matching and ranking generated by AI tools, right? That's where I would focus my energy on first, and then see how that works, and then move it to the next level. So like I said, anytime you introduce a new tool, defining the objectives are very important, right? What would you leverage this tool? First of all, understanding where the bottlenecks are in your own, recruitment process. Where are the friction points, right? And the biggest bottleneck is, of course, screening the resumes. And again, when I am matching and ranking them as, a one-woman army, again, my unconscious bias comes in. Oh, he went to the same college that I went to. Oh, there's another person in this company who went to this school. Let me go and ask him or her, do you know this person? And this person says, oh, this person did his PhD under this professor. Very good, right? Those are good inputs. But again,
no, so to interrupt here for a second, I think that what you're saying is that AI is going to automate the mundane tasks associated with recruiting, but if I heard you correctly, it amplifies the indispensable need for human empathy, because whereas the machine, it'll sift data, they falter at the subtle art of sensing that human emotion, that exchanged idea of aspirations. And what a person, it's almost as if the recruiter who has the bots, if you will, to handle scheduling, which is my least favorite thing to do, that I'm able to spend more time with candidates and I can make sure that they feel seen and heard as opposed to just being screened. Smita, is that what you were speaking to?
Exactly. So the recruiters and the whole TA team is, remember, we are trying to hire the best possible fit for that role, right? And that candidate, or the first 3 candidates or 4 candidates or 5 candidates, we have to turn our attention to them, provide them an experience, tell them, why they should be considering joining us. Because, the top candidates always, like in my experience, bad economy, good economy, excellent economy, always have options. They will have 2, 3 offers.
So about that, they always will have options, but we've talked about the fact that you're getting like 400 to 800 applicants per job description or per job ad. I'm just wondering, Elena, how do you see matching and ranking as your ally in those candidates that are trying to solicit your attention?
Yeah, so I think definitely time to hire, right? I think Smita mentioned it. They might have other offers, right? So it'll get to my inbox faster. So there's that piece.
Sure.
Also getting back to the candidates, also true, very important. But I think if you're in recruiting, you have this old school mentality of building relationships. That's why we've all gotten into it, right? And that building relationship piece gets lost when, especially if you're a full cycle recruiter, you don't have sourcers, you're just volume, volume, volume. I need to get through it. And there is a piece of the human part of it that you can't replace, which is, we talk about just understanding the reason that somebody wants to move, understanding the culture behind one company or another. I've done executive recruiting before, and if I told someone, hey, I just used an AI bot to figure out who the people were that I'm sending to you, that wouldn't work. So reality is that high touch, it allows you to have more of that high touch with the top candidates, and it allows you to also make sure you get back to candidates that potentially are not qualified. So both sides seem like a good fit, and I think it lets us get back to what we did best when we used to have coffees with our candidates. Now it's all virtual, but building those relationships with high-level candidates is super important, and it'll allow us to have more time to do that as well.
I love that, and I think that offers a unique high touch variable, but I don't think it just offers that variable exclusively for executive level placements. I think that one of the things that we're able to do here is that with those inbound candidates, the active candidates, it's like you said, it brings the best up front so we can spend the time with them and give them that executive search kind of white glove treatment. I would wonder though, how does matching and ranking work when we're looking at passive candidates?
So, I think that, when you are looking for passive candidates, again, your tool will generate tons of names or profiles and all that, right? And, as it is, they're passive, not actively looking, right? So you would want to maximize your chances of finding the right candidate. So matching and ranking is also it's actually more important there because these are passive candidates and you don't want to reach out to candidates who do not meet your skill-based criteria, right? So if I got 1,000, profiles from sourcing tool. I would use AI to match and rank them so that I can focus. Again, time is of essence here. Like there are only so many people on the TA team who can, reach out to these passive candidates. So I would utilize this ranking and matching to sort of prioritize reaching out to the first, 20% people who match my criteria, right? And that's to your point, Helena, that's where, we can provide a high touch experience, because again, these candidates need a lot more selling, and some of them may be out of town, they may be looking for remote and all of those things. So definitely I see a great, like if I had to, I would utilize my AI tool there first for matching and ranking.
I like that. No, go for it, Elena. I apologize.
Just quick, and I think the biggest thing for me is having a TA team, especially if you have a new TA team or a more, or I should say less tenured TA team. Sometimes it takes time for them to jive with the hiring manager, and sometimes they don't know what they're looking for. A lot of these ML engineering roles are very new, and you might have recruiters that haven't touched those kind of roles before. Maybe before this, they were in big data 10 years ago, right? And so this is new. But without having to spend an inordinate amount of time as a talent leader to train them, they now have a tool that's going to help them really please, so to speak, the hiring manager with the right, criteria that they're sending to them.
Well, so I want to come back to something that both of you touched on, and that's the democratization, the kind of how this helps the playing field, if you will, because traditional credentials like the school that somebody goes to, it doesn't matter as much as what the person can do, not necessarily where they studied or who they did it with. It's my understanding from both of you that you view AI as driving skills and the assessment of those skills in real time, making sure that you shift from where you went to what you know, and making talent acquisition more meritocratic. Is that the gist of what both of you were saying, or did I oversimplify it?
Yeah, I think that is what is very important, right? So, where you went to and what was your GPA 20 years ago is irrelevant today, right? What is important is what you bring to the party now, right? What skills have you developed? How can you solve the problem that we want you to solve? And that's where, Gen AI can, make fast, matching and ranking, right? And I think that is a mind shift that all of us in the industry need to go through. The hiring managers themselves have to go through this mind shift, that where you went to, what your GPA was 20 years ago is no longer helpful. How does it help?
Wow. All right. So look, I just looked at the clock. I realized that we've been talking now for about 40 minutes, and I said that I would save the last 10 minutes for questions. I do want to ask you both to weigh in on this. We've talked about reducing time to hire and increasing TA productivity. Are there any other effects that you think matching and ranking have on the overall health or wellness or success of recruiting strategies?
Yeah, I think maybe Smita talked a little bit about this, but there is fatigue, right? Fatigue, like recruiter, I mean, we're human, so we can only look at so many resumes before we're just start to go cross-eyed, right? And so I think it's real for us, it's burnout, right? Like you want your team to have work-life balance, and you want to make sure that it's a healthy team. And I think that's a big part of it too, when you're pitching a tool like this, and often it's to finance because they're the ones that sign off on tools. You're really talking through the ROI of retention of your humans and really like less attrition on the TA team, right? I just think it could be overall very helpful in so many different aspects. I really, because I remember the days of going through endless resumes, and I always felt a heartache when I couldn't get to, yeah. So, I mean, I just think that the burnout is real. And I think, we at some point kind of just get desensitized, and we might not be able to look for those keywords as well as we did the first 20 batch, right? And so I think there's other places where it could help retain healthy talent teams and help with work-life balance.
Smita, any other big lifts that AI can do to make my life better. Not bitter. I don't want my life to be bitter. I want it to be better. I'm sorry. I apologize for the
No,
slip
you
there.
know, we want, we all want our lives to be better, right? That's what tools are, technology is for. You know, it's supposed to take us to the promised land where we are focusing on what is important. And I think, you know, one of the things that we didn't get a chance to talk about, the candidates are also using Gen AI to generate resumes and apply to all these roles, right?
Oh, yes.
So I'm thinking, you know, I don't know how that will happen, you know, that the company Gen AI tool that is doing matching and ranking somehow figures out, you know, like a bot versus bot war happening, you know, sort of thing. And they kind of make lives easy for us, the humans, right? So, you know, I read somewhere that one of the biggest worries of hiring managers these days is not about having resume gaps, yay, or having, you know, all the requirements. They worry that the resume was generated by an AI, right?
Oh, I get that, right? Like, you know, Smita, there was an article the other day about by the founder of Bumble, the dating app, where she was saying she foresees a future where everybody has an AI avatar and your AI avatar screens the other AI avatar to find out if you're a match, and that plays the matchmaker. So I agree with you. I don't think that is too far afield. I do want to answer some of the questions in Q&A. I've got one asking, are there specialized AI tools beyond what is available inside my ATS? They don't seem to provide much. So I would love to answer a question because I have been grilling Smita and Elena for the past 45 minutes. You know, I think it all depends on the applicant tracking system that you're using, right? Is that there's some that do have those kind of tools baked into them, but they're very clunky, right? Like, for instance, there's an AI tool that I'm familiar with inside of an ATS that the company hires 100% remote, but yet the tool looks at the geographical proximity between the candidate and the home office to determine whether or not that candidate's a good fit. And that completely goes against the skills-based hiring that Smita and Elena and I have had a conversation around today. So some of the tools that are out there are clunky. I think that the best solution is going to be a future add-on that you find that is able to address the needs for passive candidates and the needs and concerns of active candidates. That's a great question. Any other questions that we can answer? I know we're running out of time. Smita, Elena, if there are no other questions, I will leave the two of you to ask me a question because, like I said, I've grilled you incessantly for the past 40 minutes. What is there that I can answer rather than just be the question guy?
All right, I will take on that opportunity. So, you know, you are the most active, you know, you're doing talent acquisition, you know, you're hiring people out there. What have you seen in the last 1 to 2 year shift from a candidate perspective in terms of?
So unfortunately, what I've seen that candidates are there's a lot of aspirational applications, right? And I think that that's good and bad. It's bad in the immediate because somebody who is a data analyst is not going to be a principal data scientist. But if you put them into your applicant tracking system and you have a tool that follows their career and matches and ranks them where they were to and benchmarks them to where they will be, that's a powerful conversation that you can have with somebody who had a good experience with your brand, is interested, educated, and qualified for your role, and someone who possesses the skill set that you're looking for, regardless of where they've moved into in their career. So Smita, I look at it as an immediate, I can't really fix this thing, but a future where we can build together and we can create engagement to help that candidate get from better to best while growing the company's interest at the same time.
Wow, that's a very good, you know, and this AI tool can be very handy in there, right? To do kind of follow through this future future hires, right? Because as human beings, again, we are limited. And then if I quit my job, my relationship with that candidate kind of comes to an end as far as this company is concerned. But if you have a tool that is kind of, it also sounds a little bit creepy when I say tracking this candidate. But, in some way or the other, if you flag it that this, revisit this candidate 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and see what they're doing.
So Smita, I agree with you. It does sound creepy. And that's why a lot of ATSs ask for the candidate to opt into their talent community. That's one.
Yes.
Two, a dirty little secret that I have, which is not so secret, is that I have my Hot 100. I know it sounds like a radio channel, but my Hot 100, every Friday, I reach out to 25 candidates. That's 4 times a month. And I check in with them just to see how they're doing. They are candidates that I've worked with since I was at Twitter, since I was at Apple, since I'm now at McAfee, so that I keep that conversation going and create that stickiness. I wish there was an AI that kept me on task about that all the time, because I'm just tracking it via a Google Doc.
Yeah.
That was going to be one of my questions, is what are you looking forward to most in like the future of AI? And you just answered that. I think it's already a work in progress, by the way. This whole CRM automation is already a work. So it'll be there for you soon.
So what I'm looking forward to the most is that I had an incident that came up with a hiring manager where they were saying, I'm looking for this skill and this skill. And I was like, those two things do not go together. All right. I need this person to be an expert at Python. Where was that in the job description? Oh, it was implied because you need Python to work all these different Apache technologies. I'm going to get pitchy for a minute, and I'm going to say, find me an AI tool that will read between the lines in the job description and read between the lines in the candidate profile, and you will make me look like a smarter recruiter. That's what I need.
Yeah. Makes total sense.
All right. Well, then with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jeff to wrap things up. I appreciate Smita. I appreciate Elena. I appreciate BlueGen for bringing all of us together for us to have a lunchtime conversation, or an early breakfast or a late breakfast conversation if you're on the West Coast like everybody else is. Jeff, I'm going to pass the mic to you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Brian, Smita. Thank you, Elena. And thank you to everyone who attended today. If you do have any follow-up questions for the team, you can route them right through BlueGen, info@bluegen.com, and it's BLUJIN.com. To Brian's point before, BlueGen is what we believe is the next gen of talent acquisition. So when it comes to find me a tool that can actually read between the lines, we actually have the ability to do that. Another thing which I want to just point out, overlapping a lot of the conversation, there's a lot of criticism about AI for many, many years. It's not a new thing. And the two primary criticisms are that AI is an opaque box, that you have no idea what's going on inside of it. It just, puts out its result, and then you run with it. And the other big criticism is that there's no human in the loop. So when looking for technology, AI technology, you want to find technology where those two criticisms are not true. AI technology where you actually can get a sense or even audit what has gone on inside the opaque box. And to Elena's point, and Smita, it's a tool that needs guidance from the human. The human has to be in the loop, and that's kind of the opposite of the way a lot of AI developers are thinking. Right. So if you want to hear more about that, the idea of being able to guide the AI or use it and interact with it in order to produce the results and help you read between the lines, that's something that we're also willing to talk about. Once again, info@bluegen.com. Thank you.